Margaret Harper woke to the sound of the dripping faucet in the bathroom, the very one Robert had promised to fix for months now. Now this metallic tapping, like a metronome counting empty hours, would irritate her until she either called a plumber or learned to live with this sound, just as she'd learned to live with the silence in an apartment where newspapers used to rustle in the mornings and coffee used to burble in the pot. 1 month. Exactly 1 month ago, Robert had left her life as suddenly as he'd once entered it without warning, leaving behind a pile of unfinished business and a strange feeling of incompleteness. The doctor said massive heart attack, instantaneous death. Margaret thought that's how it should be for men, quickly, without suffering, without long goodbyes in hospital wards. But then why did she feel cheated? As if she'd been robbed of the opportunity to say or learn something important. The kitchen greeted her with the familiar smell of tea leaves. She still brewed tea for 2 out of habit. She'd take out 2 cups, then, catching herself, put 1 back in the cupboard. This daily ritual of reminding herself of her own solitude had become something like a morning prayer in reverse. Not gratitude for a new day, but an acknowledgement of loss. Outside the window, the February morning spread like a gray blanket over the city. The snow that had fallen the day before had already turned into gray slush under the feet of the rare passers-by. Margaret looked at this picture and thought that winter this year was somehow especially long, as if nature had decided to adjust to her internal state. The telephone ring tore through the morning silence like a stone hitting the surface of a pond. "Mom, how are you?" Sarah's voice sounded cheerful, but Margaret had already learned to distinguish in her daughter's intonations that special carefulness that had appeared after the funeral. Sarah seemed afraid that her mother might crumble from a careless word. "Fine, sweetie. Drinking tea, looking out the window," Margaret answered, sitting at the table and mechanically straightening the tablecloth. "How are you? How's Tom?" "We're good. Listen, Mom, I've been thinking maybe you should change something in your life. You know, some kind of trip. Or," Sarah hesitated, choosing her words, "or maybe sort through Dad's things? Sell that property by the lake? You never went there anyway." The property. Margaret involuntarily shuddered. Yes, that lakeside property was like a splinter for her, a constant reminder that in her life with Robert, there were zones where she was forbidden to enter. Every weekend, for almost 17 years straight, her husband would pack his fishing gear, load the car with a thermos of soup and a jar of worms, and disappear until Sunday evening. To all her timid offers to keep him company, he'd respond categorically. "Maggie, fishing is a man's thing. A woman at the fishing spot brings bad luck. You'd better stay home and rest, watch some show." And she complied, as she complied with much else in their marriage. Submission had become her second nature, as if she'd been born with a special gene that didn't allow her to contradict her husband, insist on her own way, or demand explanations. Robert decided. She agreed. It was easier that way, calmer that way. It was right, she thought then. "You know, Sarah, you're right," Margaret said, surprising herself with her own decisiveness. "I really don't need that property. What would I do with it? Go there and catch fish?" She even chuckled at the thought. "And the extra money wouldn't hurt." "Exactly," Sarah said happily. "Real estate is moving well right now, even vacation properties. Want me to help you with the paperwork?" "No, sweetie. I'll manage myself. I need to learn to do these things independently." After the conversation with her daughter, Margaret felt a strange relief. The decision to sell the property came easily, as if she'd shed an invisible burden from her shoulders. This patch of land by the water had always seemed alien and hostile to her, a place where she wasn't allowed by some incomprehensible masculine laws. She found the property documents in Robert's desk, in the very drawer he'd always kept locked. The key turned up in the pocket of his old jacket. Margaret came across it when she was packing things for charity. Among the property certificates, insurance policies, and other papers lay a folder labeled Lake in Robert's neat handwriting, which she knew by heart. The property had been purchased back in 2008. Margaret vaguely remembered that period. They were having money troubles then. Robert had lost his job at the factory. They were scraping by on her teacher's salary and his odd jobs. Where the money for the property came from, she didn't know. Her husband had said then that he'd bought it cheaply from a friend who was urgently moving to another city. She hadn't delved into the details in their family. Financial matters were traditionally handled by the man. Dream Home Realty was located in a new shopping center on the second floor, between a children's clothing store and a beauty salon. Margaret stood for a long time before the entrance, gathering her courage. At 52, she was selling property for the first time in her life, and it scared her more than it should have. The manager, Victor Stevens, turned out to be a middle-aged man with a welcoming smile and an ability to listen attentively. He patiently explained to Margaret all the nuances of the transaction, showed similar listings on the market, and estimated the approximate value of the property. Crystal Lake, he said thoughtfully, studying the documents. Good location, environmentally clean. Not many properties for sale there right now. How long have you owned it? My husband bought it, Margaret answered shortly. I've never been there. Victor raised his eyebrows in surprise, but said nothing. In his profession, he'd seen everything, and clients' family peculiarities no longer surprised him. Tomorrow we'll go and take a look, he suggested. Need to take photos for the listing. Assess the condition of any structures, if there are any. Would around 11 in the morning work for you? For the rest of the day, Margaret felt uneasy. The upcoming trip to the lake caused a strange agitation in her, a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. What would she see there? A fishing shack with rods and jars of bait? The place where her husband spent the best hours of his life? Unwilling to share those hours with her? In the evening, she took out old photographs from the closet, those rare shots where Robert was captured with fishing gear. In most of them, he stood with a caught fish in his hands, satisfied and relaxed. Strange, but Margaret had never wondered who took these photos. Robert always said he went fishing alone, that it was his way of being alone with nature and his own thoughts. That night she had a strange dream. She walked along the shore of an unfamiliar lake, and Robert called to her from afar, but his voice grew quieter until it dissolved in the sound of waves. Margaret woke with the feeling that something important had escaped her, something she should have understood but hadn't. In the morning, getting ready for the trip, she spent a long time choosing what to wear. Finally, she settled on a dark blue coat and comfortable boots after all. She'd have to walk on unfamiliar terrain. In her bag, she put a thermos of tea and sandwiches, though she understood she wasn't going on a walk but on business. Victor arrived exactly on time in his silver SUV. The car was clean and smelled of air freshener clearly. The agent took care of his work vehicle. Nice weather for a drive, he said cheerfully, helping Margaret into the passenger seat. About an hour and a half to the lake. I hope you don't mind if I play some music? Not at all, Margaret replied, fastening her seatbelt. They drove in silence at first. Then Victor began asking careful questions about the property. Had her husband gone there often? Had he invited friends? Were there any structures on the land? I don't know, Margaret was forced to admit each time. My husband never told me the details. He said it was his place for solitude. Victor nodded understandingly, though she could see surprise in his eyes. What kind of marriage was it where the wife knew nothing about her husband's property? The city gradually gave way to suburbs, then to forests and fields. The February landscape was bleak. Bare trees, dirty snow, gray sky. But the farther they drove, the more beautiful it became. The forest grew denser, the air cleaner. We're almost there, Victor announced, turning onto a narrow dirt road. According to GPS, it should be right around here. The car drove through dense pines. The road was bumpy, and Margaret clutched her seat. Then the trees parted, and a head appeared. Margaret froze. In front of her stood not a fishing shack, not a simple shed, but a real house. Small but solid, with a porch, shutters on the windows, and most incredible smoke rising from the chimney. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice hoarse. This can't be it. Victor was already checking the address against the documents. No, this is it. The coordinates match. The cadastral number is correct. Margaret got out of the car on shaky legs. The house looked lived in. Near the porch, firewood was neatly stacked. Curtains hung in the windows. From inside came the sound of music, some popular song playing on the radio. Someone lived here. Someone was home right now. Her heart pounded as she approached the porch. Victor followed, sensing something was wrong. Mrs. Harper, maybe we should. Before he could finish, the door opened. In the doorway stood a woman around 40, pretty despite the tired eyes and hair gathered in a simple ponytail. She wore an apron, and her hands were dusted with flour, as if she'd been baking. The woman looked at Margaret, and her face went pale. Oh my God, she whispered, clutching the doorframe. Who are you? Margaret asked, though somewhere deep inside, she already knew the answer. I'm Janet, the woman said quietly. Janet Collins. And you must be Margaret. The world tilted. Margaret grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. Robert's wife, she forced out. Yes, his legal wife. Janet's voice trembled. Please, come in. I think we need to talk. Victor cleared his throat. Perhaps I should wait in the car. No, Margaret said firmly. You stay. You're my witness to whatever this is. Inside the house. Margaret found herself in another life. A life she never knew existed. The entrance led directly into a spacious living room with a fireplace. Logs crackled in it, filling the room with warmth and the smell of pine. The furniture was simple but cozy, a sofa with colorful cushions, an old rocking chair, shelves with books, and everywhere photographs. Robert with this woman, on the porch of this very house. Robert with this woman by the lake, holding fishing rods. Robert with this woman and a teenage boy who looked heartbreakingly like him. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way of tilting his head. Margaret approached the wall where a large family portrait hung. In it, Robert sat in the center. The woman Janet stood behind him with her hand on his shoulder, and the boy sat at his feet. All three smiled at the camera. A perfect family. How long? Margaret asked, not turning around. Janet sank into a chair, as if her legs could no longer hold her. 15 years. We met when he was between jobs. I'm a nurse. I was working at the clinic where he came for a checkup. He had high blood pressure. 15 years. Margaret repeated the words, as if trying to taste them, understand them. All this time, while I thought he was fishing, he was with us, with me and Max. Max is our son. He's 14 now. A son. The word came out like a groan. You have a son together. Mrs. Harper, I know how this looks. Do you? Margaret turned around sharply. Do you really know how this looks? My husband, has been living a double life for 15 years. 15 years! Every weekend, every fishing trip, every time he said he needed alone time, he was here, with you, building this. She gestured around the room. This whole other life! I never meant to hurt you, Janet said quietly. I knew about you from the beginning. Robert told me he was married. He said he couldn't leave you, that you'd been together too long, that it would destroy you. He said, Margaret laughed bitterly. And you believed him. You accepted being the weekend wife while I was the weekday wife. How very modern of you both. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because I'm standing here in a house my husband built with money from God knows where for another woman, and I'm trying to understand how any of this makes sense. Victor shifted uncomfortably by the door. Mrs. Harper, perhaps we should— Did he love you? Margaret asked suddenly, ignoring Victor. The question hung in the air. Janet looked down at her flour-dusted hands. I think, she said slowly, he loved us both. In different ways. I'm not trying to justify what he did. It was wrong. It was a terrible thing to do to you. But he was a good father to Max. He came every weekend, helped with homework, taught him to fish, played baseball with him, read him bedtime stories when he was little, while telling me he was catching trout. Yes, the simple acknowledgement, without excuses or justifications, somehow made it harder to bear. Where is he now? Margaret asked. This boy, Max, at school. He'll be home around 3. Margaret looked at her watch. It was almost noon. I want to see everything, she said suddenly. Every room. I want to know exactly what kind of life my husband was living here. Janet nodded and stood. Of course, you have every right. She led them through the house. A small but well-equipped kitchen with copper pots hanging from hooks and herbs growing in pots on the windowsill. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub and homemade soap on the sink. 2 bedrooms upstairs, one clearly Janet and Robert's, with a large bed and more photographs on the dresser. The other belonging to Max, with posters of baseball players on the walls and a desk piled with textbooks. He wants to be a doctor, Janet said, noticing Margaret's gaze on the anatomy textbook. Like me. Well, I'm a nurse. But he wants to go further. Robert was so proud of him. Margaret picked up a framed photo from Max's desk. It showed Robert and the boy on a boat, both holding up a large fish, grinning at the camera. Robert wore the same fishing hat he always wore, the one with flies stuck in the band, the one he told Margaret his father had given him. Who took this picture? She asked. I did, Janet said. We'd gone out on the lake together that day. Max had just turned 12. He caught that bass all by himself. Robert was so excited. Margaret set the photo down carefully. He told me that hat was from his father, that it was precious to him because his father died when he was young. His father is alive, Janet said quietly. Lives in Arizona. Robert talks to him every month. Another lie. How many more were there? They returned to the living room. Victor had tactfully remained downstairs, and Margaret could hear him making a phone call outside, probably canceling his afternoon appointments. I should go, Margaret said, though she made no move toward the door. I need to process this. Mrs. Harper, Janet said, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I want you to know I never set out to steal your husband. It just happened. We fell in love, and then I got pregnant, and everything became more complicated. You got pregnant, Margaret repeated. Was it an accident? Janet hesitated. No, we planned it. Robert wanted a child. He said you two had tried but couldn't. The knife twisted deeper. Yes, they'd tried for years. Fertility treatments, tests, specialists, all futile. And all that time, Robert could have children. He just couldn't have them with her. I'm sorry, Janet whispered. I'm so sorry. Margaret looked at her, this woman who'd shared her husband for 15 years, who'd borne his child, who'd probably heard all his hopes and dreams and fears, things he'd never shared with Margaret. Did he tell you about me? She asked. About our life? Sometimes. He said you were kind, patient, that you made the best apple pie, that you sang in the church choir and loved old movies and collected teacups. Janet paused. He said you deserved better than what he was giving you. Yet that guilt didn't make him stop. No, it didn't. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, birds sang. It was almost peaceful, which made everything more surreal. There's something else you should know, Janet said finally, about the will. Margaret's head snapped up. The will? Robert left a will with his lawyer. He updated it 2 years ago. This house and the property he left it to Max. There's also a college fund, money set aside for Max's medical school. And a letter. For you. A letter. The lawyer has it. But Robert left a copy here, he said. He said if you ever found out about us, you should read it. He wanted you to understand. Understand? Margaret laughed harshly. There's nothing to understand. He lied to me for 17 years. He built a whole separate life. He had a son I knew nothing about. What's to understand? I'll get the letter, Janet said quietly, and left the room. Margaret sat alone in this strange house, this monument to her husband's deception. She could hear Victor's voice outside, still on the phone. She could hear Janet's footsteps upstairs. She could hear her own heart breaking, piece by piece. Janet returned with an envelope. Margaret's name was written on it in Robert's handwriting. I'll leave you alone, Janet said, and went to the kitchen. Margaret held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of her wanted to tear it up unread, to deny Robert even this final communication. But a larger part needed to know, needed to hear his explanation, however inadequate. She opened the envelope. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you've discovered the truth about Crystal Lake, about Janet, about Max, about the life I've been living every weekend for the past 15 years. I know there are no words that can excuse what I've done. The lies, the betrayal, the double life, it's all inexcusable. I'm not even going to try to explain it away or make it sound less terrible than it is. But I want you to know some things. And I'm asking you, begging you to believe that these things are true, even if everything else I said was a lie. I loved you, Maggie. I still love you. You were my home, my anchor, the steady presence that kept me grounded. When I was with you, I felt safe and comfortable and known. You accepted me as I was, never demanding more than I could give. But I also loved Janet, and I loved our son Max with a fierceness that surprised me. I thought I'd made peace with not having children, but when Max was born, something in me shifted. I became a father, and I wouldn't walk away from that. I know what you're thinking. I should have made a choice. Left you for Janet, or left Janet for you. That's what a decent man would have done. But I wasn't decent. I was selfish and cowardly. I wanted both lives. I wanted the comfort and history I had with you, and I wanted the new life and fatherhood I had with them. So I built this impossible balancing act, knowing that someday it would all come crashing down. I told myself I was protecting you, that you were happier not knowing. But really, I was protecting myself. From having to choose. From having to give up anything. The property and house belong to Janet and Max now. It's their home, and Max needs it. But I've made sure you're provided for. The apartment is yours, free and clear. The savings account, the life insurance, my pension, it all goes to you. You won't have financial worries. I know you're strong, Maggie. Stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. You'll survive this. You'll build a new life. Maybe you'll even find someone who can give you the full attention and devotion you always deserved, but never got from me. I'm sorry I wasn't the husband you deserved. I'm sorry I wasted so many of your years. I'm sorry for every lie, every deception, every moment I let you believe in a marriage that was only half real. If there's an afterlife, I hope I get the chance to make amends, but I'm not counting on it. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Take care of yourself, Maggie. Be happy. Be free. All my love. And I do mean that, Robert. Margaret read the letter twice, then a third time. With each reading, she felt different emotions, anger, grief, betrayal, and strangely, a kind of relief. At least now she knew. The not knowing, the wondering if something was wrong with her. The years of accepting his distance, at least now she understood. Janet returned from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. She set one in front of Margaret. "Thank you," Margaret said automatically, then realized how absurd it was thanking her husband's mistress for tea in the house he'd built for her. "What will you do?" Janet asked. "About the will. You could contest it. You're his legal wife. You have grounds." "I don't know yet," Margaret said honestly. "Right now, I need to go home. I need to think." "Of course." Janet paused. "Mrs. Harper? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I am. You said you're a nurse?" "Yes, at County General. I work in the ER. How did you manage? Working full-time and raising a child, with Robert only here on weekends?" "It wasn't easy," Janet admitted. "My mother helped when Max was little. And Robert contributed financially, of course. He was generous with money, at least." "Blood money," Margaret said bitterly. "My teacher's salary was never quite enough, was it? I always wondered how he afforded his fishing hobby. Now I know. He wasn't spending money on fishing. He was spending it on you." Janet flinched, but didn't deny it. Victor appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Harper, whenever you're ready." Margaret stood. Her legs felt shaky, but she managed to walk to the door. "One more thing," she said, turning back to Janet. "What time did you say Max gets home from school?" "Around 3. "Why?" "I'll be back tomorrow," Margaret said. "Same time. I want to meet him." Janet's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "No," Margaret said honestly, "but I need to see him. This boy, Robert's son." The drive back to the city passed in a blur. Victor tried to make conversation at first, then gave up and let her sit in silence. When they reached the realty office, he turned to her. "Mrs. Harper, I just want to say, in all my years doing this job, I've never seen anything like that. If you need anything help with the legal side, recommendations for lawyers, please don't hesitate to call." "Thank you, Victor. I appreciate it." She drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning. When she got to her apartment, she didn't even take off her coat. She just sat on the couch and stared at the wall. The phone rang. Sarah. "Mom, how did it go? Did you get good photos for the listing?" Margaret opened her mouth to answer and found she couldn't form words. "Mom? Are you there?" "Sarah," Margaret finally managed. "I need you to come over. There's something you need to know about your father." 2 hours later, Sarah sat on the same couch, her face pale with shock, as Margaret told her everything. The house, Janet, Max, the letter. "A secret family," Sarah kept repeating, as if saying it enough times would make it make sense. "Dad had a whole other family? A son?" "A son who looks just like him," Margaret confirmed. "Oh my God, Mom, how are you even sitting here talking calmly? This is insane. I don't even have words." "I'm not calm," Margaret said. "I'm in shock. I feel like someone dropped a bomb on my life, and I'm still waiting for the dust to settle." Sarah grabbed her mother's hands. "What are you going to do? You're going to fight the will, right? Contest it? That woman and her illegitimate son shouldn't get anything. Dad's estate should go to you, his legal wife." "I don't know what I'm going to do. Mom, you need a lawyer. I need time to think," Margaret said firmly. "And tomorrow I'm going back to that house." "What? Why?" "To meet Max, Robert's son." "No." Sarah stood up, pacing. Absolutely not! Mom, you don't owe them anything. That boy is not your responsibility. And that woman stole 17 years of your life. Did she? Margaret asked quietly. Or did Robert give them to her? Janet didn't sneak into our marriage and steal him. He went willingly. He chose to be there every weekend. That doesn't make it better. No, it doesn't. But it makes it clear. Janet isn't the villain here. Robert was. And Max is just a child who happened to be born into this mess. Sarah sat back down, tears streaming down her face. I loved Dad. I really loved him. And now I find out he was lying to all of us, to you, to me, to them too, probably. How am I supposed to process this? Margaret pulled her daughter into a hug. I don't know, honey. I really don't know. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 17 years. Had there been signs, clues she'd missed? The late-night phone calls he took in another room. The way he'd sometimes smell different when he came home, like unfamiliar soap or perfume. The time she'd found a child's drawing in his jacket pocket, and he'd said a colleague's kid had given it to him. God, she'd been so blind. So trusting, so pathetically, willfully blind. But had she really been? Or had she simply chosen not to see? Had some part of her known, deep down, that something wasn't right, but been too afraid to investigate? She got up and went to Robert's closet. She'd barely touched it since his death, couldn't bear to sort through his things. Now she pulled out boxes, searching for... What? More evidence of his lies? She found them. Small things. A receipt from a restaurant she'd never been to. A birthday card signed Love Always, M&M. A keychain with a photo of Max as a toddler. He'd kept mementos. Evidence of his double life hidden among the debris of their shared one. Margaret sat on the floor, surrounded by the detritus of her marriage, and finally let herself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the years wasted, for the children she'd never had, for the marriage that had been a lie, for the man she'd loved who had never really been hers. When she finished, dawn was breaking. She felt emptied out, hollow, but also, strangely, lighter. The worst had happened. The truth was out. She could start rebuilding from here. The next afternoon, Margaret drove back to Crystal Lake. Alone this time, she'd told Sarah not to come, that she needed to do this by herself. She arrived at 2:30. Janet answered the door, looking anxious. He doesn't know you're coming, she said. I didn't want to upset him before school. I just told him. I told him someone who knew his father wanted to meet him. That's fine. They sat in the living room, the same one from yesterday that now felt slightly more familiar. Janet offered tea again. Margaret accepted. It gave her hands something to do. At 3:10, they heard the sound of a school bus. Then, footsteps on the porch, and the door opened. The boy who walked in was tall for 14, gangly in the way of teenagers. He wore jeans and a school hoodie, and carried a backpack covered in band patches. And when he looked up and saw Margaret, she saw Robert's eyes looking back at her. Max, Janet said. This is Mrs. Harper, Margaret Harper. The boy's face went still. Then understanding dawned. You're Dad's wife. His other wife. I'm his widow, Margaret corrected gently. His only legal wife. Max set his backpack down slowly. I didn't know if you knew about us, Dad never said. I didn't, until yesterday. The boy's face crumpled. Oh, God. You just found out? I'm so sorry. This must be so hard for you. The genuine compassion in his voice made Margaret's eyes sting. This boy, this stranger who shared Robert's DNA, was worried about her feelings. May I sit down? She asked. Of course, Max said quickly, gesturing to the couch. He sat in the armchair across from her, perched on the edge like he might need to flee at any moment. They looked at each other for a long moment. You look like him, Margaret said finally. It's startling. I know. Everyone says so. Max paused. What was he like? With you, I mean? Distant, Margaret said honestly. Reliable, but distant. He went to work, came home, helped with bills, watched TV. We had a quiet life. He was different here, Max said. More relaxed. He'd laugh a lot. We'd play catch, go fishing, work on projects together. He taught me how to fix things, how to cook eggs, how to throw a curveball. He never taught me how to cook eggs, Margaret said, and laughed a short, bitter sound. I cooked all his meals for 30 years, and he never once offered to teach me anything. Max looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, it's fine. I want to know. I want to understand who he really was. Because apparently, the man I knew wasn't the whole picture. Janet, who'd been silent in the corner, spoke up. Max, honey, why don't you show Mrs. Harper your room? Your achievement certificates? Your science project? Max looked uncertain. Is that okay? I mean, do you want to? Margaret nodded. Yes, I'd like that. Max's room was what she'd seen yesterday, but now, with the boy himself to explain it, he showed her his model solar system, his collection of medical textbooks, some borrowed from his mother's nursing school days, his certificates from science fairs and math competitions. I want to be a doctor, he explained. A pediatric oncologist specifically. I want to help kids with cancer. That's a noble goal. Dad was really supportive, he said. Max's voice caught. He said I had what it takes, that I was smart enough and caring enough. When did you find out about me? Margaret asked. About your father's other family? Max sat on his bed, picked at a loose thread on his bedspread. When I was 10, I asked Mom why Dad didn't live with us all the time like other kids' dads. She sat me down and told me the truth. That Dad had another life, another home. That he loved us, but he loved you too, and he couldn't choose. How did that make you feel? Confused, hurt, angry. Max looked up at her. But Mom explained that adults sometimes make complicated choices. That Dad wasn't a bad person, just a conflicted one. And that his being part-time didn't mean he loved me any less. Do you believe that? I don't know, Max admitted. Sometimes. Other times, I think if he really loved us, he would have been honest. Would have made a choice instead of living a lie. We agree on that, at least. Max smiled sadly. Mrs. Harper, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you going to try to take the house? Mom's really worried. This is the only home I've ever known, and she works so hard to pay the bills. I don't know yet, Margaret said honestly. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. That's fair, Max nodded. If you do, I understand. You have every right. We're the secret family. You're the real one. You're both real, Margaret found herself saying. Your father made you real when he chose to be your father. That's not your fault. Downstairs, Margaret found Janet in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of roasting chicken filled the house. He's a good kid, Margaret said. Janet turned, relief evident on her face. He is. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. Janet, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay? Did you know he was married when you started seeing him? Janet dried her hands on a towel, met Margaret's eyes. Yes, he told me on our second date. Said he was in an unhappy marriage, that you and he hadn't been intimate in years, that you basically lived separate lives under the same roof. Margaret felt her face grow hot. That's not true. We had a normal marriage. Not passionate maybe, but not dead either. I know that now, or at least I suspect it. Robert painted a very specific picture of his home life. Made it sound like you two were more roommates than spouses. I'm not making excuses. I still made the choice to be with a married man, but I want you to know what I thought I was doing. You thought you were rescuing him from a loveless marriage. Something like that, yes. And when you got pregnant, I told him he didn't have to stay, that I could raise the baby alone. But he insisted. Said he wanted to be a father, that he'd always wanted kids. Janet paused. He said you couldn't have children, that it was a source of grief for you both. We tried, Margaret said quietly. For years, tests, treatments, everything. The doctors could never figure out why it wasn't working. Robert seemed as disappointed as I was. And then he had a child with me, Janet finished. God, that must have been devastating to learn. You have no idea. They stood in silence, the two women connected by one man's web of lies. Mrs. Harper, Janet said finally, I won't fight you. If you want the house, if you want to contest the will, I won't stand in your way. Max and I will manage somehow. We always have. You love him, Margaret said. Robert, you really loved him. I still do, Janet admitted. I know I shouldn't. I know he lied to me too, kept things from me, led a whole separate life I knew nothing about. But yes, I loved him. I still love him. So did I, Margaret said. And then, surprising herself, so do I. Margaret left the lake house as the sun was setting. Max had given her an awkward hug goodbye, and Janet had pressed a jar of homemade jam into her hands. Robert always said you loved raspberry preserves. On the drive home, Margaret's mind was a whirlwind. She'd gone expecting to hate these people, and instead, she'd found them painfully human. Janet wasn't a homewrecker or a temptress. She was a single mother working hard to raise her son. And Max wasn't some symbol of her husband's betrayal. He was a 14-year-old kid who wanted to be a doctor and loved baseball and had lost his father. But that didn't change what Robert had done. Didn't change the lies, the years of deception, the fundamental betrayal of everyone involved. When she got home, Sarah was waiting, having let herself in with her spare key. "Well?" Sarah demanded. "How was it?" "Complicated. Mom, please tell me you're not getting soft on them. They're not your family. They're Dad's dirty secret. They're people, Sarah. Flawed people caught in a terrible situation, but people nonetheless. So what? You're just going to let them have everything? The house? The property? The money Dad set aside? I don't know yet." Margaret snapped, then softened. "I'm sorry, honey. I don't mean to take this out on you. I need time to figure out what the right thing to do is. The right thing is to protect yourself, to make sure you're taken care of." "I am taken care of. Robert left me the apartment, the savings, the life insurance. I'm not going to be destitute." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Sarah? Revenge? Punishing them for Robert's sins?" Sarah deflated. "I just don't want to see you taken advantage of. Again." Margaret hugged her daughter. "I know, sweetie, and I appreciate you looking out for me, but I need to handle this my way." Over the next few weeks, Margaret found herself in a strange pattern. She'd go to Crystal Lake every few days, usually in the afternoon after school. She'd sit with Max while he did homework, helping with English assignments. She was an English teacher after all. She'd drink tea with Janet and listen to stories about Robert's weekend life, stories that hurt and healed in equal measure. Sarah thought she was insane. "Mom, you're basically playing house with Dad's mistress and his illegitimate son. Don't you see how messed up that is?" "I see how complicated it is," Margaret corrected. "Sarah, I spent 30 years of my life with a man I thought I knew. Now I'm trying to understand who he really was. And the only way to do that is to see the life he built here. You're torturing yourself. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally learning the truth." Through Janet's stories, a different Robert emerged. A man who built things with his hands, the porch swing, the garden shed, the treehouse Max had loved as a child. A man who coached Max's Little League team and helped with bake sales and went to school plays. A man who laughed easily and made terrible dad jokes and fell asleep during movies. This Robert was a stranger to Margaret. Her Robert had been serious, controlled, careful. He'd never built anything, never coached anything, never made jokes. "It's like he was two different people," she said to Janet one afternoon. "Or maybe he was one person who felt comfortable showing different sides to different people," Janet suggested. "With you, he was the responsible provider. With us, he was the fun dad. Maybe neither version was the whole truth. Or maybe both were lies. Maybe." One day, about 6 weeks after discovering the truth, Margaret received a call from Robert's lawyer. "Mrs. Harper, I'm calling about the estate. I know this has been a difficult time, but we need to start the probate process. There are decisions to be made. I understand. I'm legally obligated to inform you that you have grounds to contest the will, the property and funds left to Maxwell Collins Well. As Robert's legal widow, you could argue, I won't be contesting the will," Margaret heard herself say. There was a pause. "Mrs. Harper, I strongly advise you to think carefully about this. We're talking about a significant amount of money, plus valuable property. I don't need to think about it. The will stands as Robert wrote it." Another pause. "May I ask why?" "Because," Margaret said slowly, working it out as she spoke, "my husband made his choices. Terrible choices, but his choices nonetheless. He wanted that property and those funds to go to his son. And despite everything, I'm going to honor that wish." "I see. Well, if you're certain." "I am." When Margaret told Sarah her decision that evening, her daughter was speechless. "You're not contesting it?" Sarah finally managed. "Mom, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's your retirement, your security." "I have retirement. I have security. The apartment is paid off. I have savings. I have Robert's life insurance. I'll be fine. But Mom, Sarah, listen to me. For 30 years, I let your father make all the decisions. I went along with whatever he said because it was easier, because I thought that's what a good wife did. Well, I'm done with that. This is my decision, mine, and I'm choosing to let Max have what his father wanted him to have. Sarah sat down heavily. I don't understand you. I don't really understand myself right now, Margaret admitted, but I know this feels right. That boy wants to be a doctor. Robert wanted to help him achieve that dream. Why should I stand in the way? Because Robert betrayed you. Yes, he did. And I'm angry about that. I'll probably be angry about it for the rest of my life. But taking that anger out on a 14-year-old boy doesn't heal my wounds. It just creates new ones. Spring arrived, bringing green to the trees around Crystal Lake. Margaret found herself spending more time there, sometimes staying for dinner. Janet was a good cook, and Max was growing on her, his enthusiasm, his intelligence, his kindness. One evening, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset over the lake, Max said, Mrs. Harper, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing all this? Being nice to us, not fighting the will, helping me with my college essays? We're basically strangers who messed up your life. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part was, Max? Not that your father loved your mother, not even that he lied. The worst part was realizing I'd spent 30 years being passive, accepting whatever came my way, never standing up for myself, never demanding more, never even asking questions. I don't see how that relates to. I'm done being passive, Margaret interrupted. I'm done letting other people's choices dictate my life. Your father made his choices. Your mother made hers. Now I'm making mine, and I'm choosing to help you because I want to. Because it makes me feel good. Because maybe, just maybe, I can take something broken and help build something better. Janet wiped her eyes. You're an extraordinary person, Margaret Harper. I'm really not, Margaret said. I'm just tired of being angry. That summer, Max took his SATs and did exceptionally well. He applied early decision to medical schools, and Margaret helped him craft his application essays. Sarah, who'd been coolly distant about the whole situation, finally came to visit the lake house. She brought her husband Tom and stood on the porch, looking around. So this is it, she said. Dad's secret life. Max came out to meet them. Nervous but polite. Hi, you must be Sarah. And Tom, I'm Max. Sarah stared at him at his face that looked so much like her father's, and her expression crumpled. God, you look just like him. I know. I'm sorry if that's hard for you. It is, Sarah said honestly. But that's not your fault. She held out her hand. Nice to meet you, Max. Officially. They shook hands, and something in the air shifted. Not to easy acceptance, but to acknowledgement. This was real. Max was real. This tangled, complicated family was real. Over lunch, Sarah grilled Max about his plans, his grades, his goals. By the end of the meal, she grudgingly admitted he seemed decent enough. High praise from Sarah, Tom joked. On the drive home, Sarah said to Margaret, I still think you're too forgiving, but I also think I get it now. A little. What changed? Meeting him, seeing the house. I don't know. It's all real now, not just abstract. Dad had a whole other life, and it wasn't some sleazy affair. It was a family, a real family. He was wrong to lie to everyone, but Max didn't ask for any of this. No, he didn't. Mom, I'm sorry I've been so angry about your choice. It's your money, your decision. And if you want to help this kid become a doctor, that's actually kind of beautiful. Margaret reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. A year after Robert's death, Margaret organized a memorial at Crystal Lake. Sarah came with Tom and their 2 children. Janet was there, of course, and Max. Even a few of Robert's old friends showed up, confused by the presence of 2 families, but polite enough not to ask questions directly. They planted a tree, a maple, that would turn brilliant red every autumn by the lake shore. Each person said something. Sarah spoke about the father she remembered reliable, if distant, always paying the bills and attending her school events. Max talked about weekend adventures, about learning to fish, about a father who taught him to tie his shoes and throw a baseball. Janet remembered quiet mornings, shared coffee, plans for the future. And Margaret? Margaret spoke about complexity. about how people contain multitudes, about how Robert was both the faithful husband and the lying cheat, both the devoted father and the absent one, both the man she loved and the man who broke her heart. "I don't forgive him," she said, looking at the newly planted tree. "I don't think I ever will, fully. But I'm trying to understand him, and I'm grateful that in death he brought us all together. We're not a conventional family, but we're a family nonetheless." Max got into medical school, his first choice, a prestigious program with a specialty in pediatric oncology. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday, and he called Margaret immediately. "I got in, Mrs. Harper, I got in." She could hear the tears in his voice, the joy and disbelief. "I knew you would," she said warmly. "You worked so hard. You earned this. I couldn't have done it without you. The essay help, the practice interviews, everything. You did the work, Max. I just supported you. I want you to come to my graduation. You and Sarah. Please, your family." Family. The word that had once meant such a clear thing now encompassed so much more. "We'll be there," Margaret promised. 2 years later, Margaret sat in an auditorium watching Max receive his white coat in the ceremony that marked the beginning of his medical training. Sarah sat next to her, holding her youngest child. Janet sat on the other side, crying quietly into a tissue. When Max crossed the stage and received his coat, all 3 women stood and cheered. Afterwards, at dinner, Max raised his glass. "To Dad," he said, "who wasn't perfect, but who gave me the gift of believing I could do this. And to Margaret, who turned a tragedy into a triumph, who showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. Thank you." They clinked glasses, this impossible family forged from betrayal and loss and, somehow, love. Margaret Harper never remarried. She didn't need to. She filled her life with teaching, with her grandchildren, with trips to Crystal Lake, where she had her own room in the guest house, Max built with his own hands, just like his father. She never fully forgave Robert. Some betrayals are too deep for complete forgiveness, but she made peace with the past. She chose to build something new rather than demolish everything in anger. And every autumn, when the maple by the lake turned brilliant red, she stood beneath it and thought about complexity, about how people are rarely all good or all bad, about how love can exist alongside betrayal, about how family can be chosen as much as inherited. The lake house, once a symbol of everything that was wrong in her marriage, became something else, a place of healing, a place where secrets became truths, where strangers became family, where endings became new beginnings. And Margaret, who'd spent so much of her life being passive and accepting, became someone else too, someone stronger, someone who made her own choices, someone who understood that forgiveness isn't about excusing the past, it's about not letting the past control your future. She was 52 when Robert died. She could have spent the next decades bitter and alone. Instead, she chose differently, and that choice, more than anything Robert ever did or didn't do, defined who she became. I hope you enjoyed this story. Your thoughts and comments inspire new stories. Have a wonderful day.